second budget. Were you present when, was there a vote providing for that opportunity? Or that was done simply by the control of the local member town of Norwich requesting those funds?
Absolutely. There was no vote that I was party to, and like I said, I only missed one meeting, and that was the snowstorm in March. So there was no vote at the board of directors level regarding that request.
Thank you. Questions, people? Alderman DeLucia.
Could you give me or give us what you would think would be the top 3 benefits of the Ombudsman and ratepayer rep program that's been instituted?
Well, that's a tough answer. The only reason why I say what would be the greatest benefit is I do believe transparency is a great benefit. However, in light of the events surrounding when I was installed, you also had the benefit of daily reporting in the paper, which gave you a lot more transparency and information than I could have ever presented in any report. So that made it a little challenging. Had that not existed, I think you would have had the benefit of a little more information that wasn't normally provided to the citizen and the ratepayer.
So would you say, well, I don't want to ask a leading question, so I'll just ask it directly. Did you experience any stonewalling in trying to achieve this higher level of transparency?
Stonewalling, not at all. Every request I made was sure, no problem. And when I followed up, I was given reasons that seemed reasonable. It didn't feel like stonewalling to me. As I said, when I asked for the last 5 years of rates, because I wanted to see that. That was provided to me. Like I said, it wasn't an official report. It was something I saw in the next meeting, and I said, yeah, I'd like a copy of that. And it just didn't happen, because it did take a little while to put together, because I was looking for something very specific. So I know that I might have added time to it by what I was requesting. With regard to the benchmarking, the only stonewalling that I judged was from the other collectives out there providing that information, and that's really what they told me. I have to judge that that was honest and that they actually did seek out that information. Knowing that the state rep asked the same exact question about a month later, I think he would have been more than open with saying that I think you guys are holding back on me if he perceived that to be the case. So,
what about resistance to the ratepayer reps in their input?
Not at all. I was welcomed. They appreciated, especially when it came to, there's a situation that they had regarding one of the cities that pulled out, and there was a legal matter surrounding that. There was something involved in that mitigation that I had some knowledge of, and they were more than happy to receive my input on how they can resolve that in the future. And hopefully they're able to adopt something like that. It's something that I see in my job every day, that when I heard it clicked and I was like, look, this is what we do in my life, and it's something that you might want to consider to help you should this occur again. But it's a way that they've been billing that was challenged. And it's something that I do daily. So I brought it up to them as something that they might want to consider.
So you just mentioned, looking, toward the future. So what was your experience in terms of their looking toward the future, especially in light of the indictments that have come down and how procedures are going to change and practices are going to change? I mean, does it appear that there's going to be a genuine effort to change?
So my perception sitting in the room, there was 90% of the board members seemed very open to a lot of the suggestions. What the challenge was is some of those suggestions looked like they were costly changes. And you're talking about other ratepayers and people who were concerned in their particular town with what the impact of some of those changes may be. So I considered that a reasonable hesitation to some of the things. There was a lot of wordsmithing. We had a lot of lawyers who were putting input, and people were challenged with certain wordings that didn't necessarily change the intent or content. So there were battles about that. There were 1 or 2 board members who just thought that this was just about nothing. And I didn't necessarily agree with that. I could have been all about nothing, but that was their intent. So those 2 board members, but that wasn't the majority.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Alderman Browning.
This is a open-ended question, but as you're aware, we have, I think, 2 solar fields in Norwich, which are built on City of Norwich property. Then we have the Stott Farm. Without revealing any trade information, can you tell us whether you think that solar or any other such energy generation inside the boundaries of Norwich is a profitable idea for CMAQ, or maybe it's not profitable, both the pros and cons of pursuing that in the future?
So that's an interesting statement, only because you said, is it a profitable venture for CMEC? And I would say it's not a profitable venture for CMEC, because that project in particular is funded by any project that they do is funded by the towns. So they proposed that project, that solar one, and all 5 members are asked, would you like to invest in this? CMEC doesn't invest in it, nor would MPU invest in it. Groton Utilities invest in it. So they choose to put in their money from their margin to invest in that project, and they receive the benefits of that should it be a profitable one. So that's MPU deciding, us having that grid, does it help us? Does it allow us to better manage our output of energy? One of the things I heard in a few meetings is, I don't remember if it was a solar grid, but there's another one, it's a backup reserve, that did help us mitigate costs during the last winter storm, where the cost of energy was extremely high. They kind of buy it in a hedge fund type of way, like with stocks, where you kind of buy low, sell high kind of thing. And their ability to use that reserve helped them mitigate the cost and keep their costs at a reasonable level. So I was happy to hear that, and they were very proud of that, and actually brought it up a couple of times in some of the meetings, how that, those types of programs, and the funny thing about that is, if a city, if one of the cities did not invest in that program, they didn't benefit from it. You had to invest in that program. So that's where I think a lot of the energy was, with ratepayers coming in and voting in on whether or not they should invest. Had MPU not invested in that program, because maybe I had a vote that was a swing vote, they wouldn't have benefited from that, and the rates would have gone high because of the cold snap and the cost of energy. So those are some of the things that they have to juggle. But I don't know if the solar one's a benefit. I don't think it probably is in the short term. Maybe long term it would be. But it's not one for CMEC, because they're not the ones who actually invest in that program. It's each of the towns.
Okay, I'm perhaps struggling to narrow down the question. I don't know if the solar fields are profitable, therefore, for NPU or anyone else who chooses to invest in them.
Yeah, that's one I can't answer. Like I said, I don't know if it is short term. I don't think it is. I would think it probably would be a long-term benefit. I don't remember hearing any benefits from that solar project yet.
Thank you.
The members? Yes, Alderman Burnham.
Thank you so much for coming in. I think this was really educational, and I just have a couple of questions just about from your perspective. So in the 10 minutes that you spoke, we learned a wealth of information, and you've been on that board for a year.
Not a year.
Not even a year. Not even a year. Yeah, less than a year. I think, or do you think that it would be valuable to have more frequent interactions? So if there was, because the ratepayer is appointed by the council, so if there was any direction or feedback to be gotten, do you think more frequent interactions? Because some of those items that you stated, I think could have been mitigated. For instance, not getting the ratepayer information from other consortiums or cooperatives. I think that while you might not be able to compare exact apples to exact apples, we could have gotten raw data rates to at least find the ballpark and, calculate the standard deviation from that.
Yeah.
So I think had we known that, we could have been, asked for that or things like that, just so we can just be abreast of what's going on more so from the ratepayer perspective that we've appointed. What do you think?
Well, that's a fair statement. I guess from my standpoint, and I'll have to take that as just a loss, that I didn't consider going to the city council to ask for that on my behalf. As a board of director member, I felt that I had more weight to ask that and get that request. I don't know if CMEC as an entity would have responded to the city council asked for that and responded any quicker.
And I'm not saying for us to ask, but have we gotten that feedback and sometimes, get other ideas and direction that you could bring back as the representative?
That's totally fair. And to be honest,
Just to have more interaction.
you're 100% right. And to be fair, like a lot of the information you received was due to prompting from questions. Like I wouldn't even thought to even put in any side of report what you asked for a question. So it would have been helpful, in hindsight in the future, if you had questions presented and then they could either be in written or they can come. I had no problem showing up anytime you wanted me to and I would have answered the questions. But without any prompting, to me, it was business as usual.
Sure.
I didn't even think that it was something that would have been of value to you or that you would have been like, oh yeah, I'm really curious about that. It was the normal course of their business. And being new into the room, I didn't know that was stuff you didn't know about because it's a public meeting. The reports are public. The only stuff they don't disclose are the executive sessions things. So I would never have even guessed that this was information that was not transparent to you. I was more looking for the things that were nuanced and not necessarily what I might have judged as fully clear. And those were the ones that I prompted and questioned, as opposed like the rates.
Right, so there's minutes and there's reports, and they're
Absolutely.
different things, and we're not in the room. I've read the minutes. Many minutes for many meetings are not as detailed. They represent decisions made, yes, but they don't fully capture discussions and how you arrived at decisions. So, this is new, so this is lessons learned. This is great to carry over for the next one. So being able to have someone to synthesize that information and just kind of, interpret it as you see fit as a ratepayer, I think would just be of monumental help to how we conduct.
And that's fair, but I think if you really looked at their package, they're not real. There's minutes, and then there's that package. Those aren't minutes. I mean, there was a wealth of information in that, like I said, I didn't think about. So you're fair in saying that, but what they disclose every month in that stuff is, it's mind-boggling, and it took me a month to sort it out because it was just a ton of data. And that I thought about, how would I summarize that for you guys? And then as I glazed over, I said, how much time would I need to be able to even put that in a picture? So that's fair.
It's just something to think about as we bring
Absolutely.
somebody else on and how we can streamline the communication and get the most bang for our buck. So to speak.
Absolutely. That is an absolutely fair assessment.
The other thing is, what advice would you give to the next ratepayer? And what kind of impact do you see them having?
So the advice I would have for the next ratepayer, well, it really actually would be more advice for the council in picking the next ratepayer. As grateful as I was to have that job because I thought that I could bring some value to it, the meetings that they have, there were a ton of meetings during the day, during the week, on very critical things, like their ethics and how they were going to handle the payment of lawyers. And I called into a few of those, but those meetings were in the middle of the day, multiple times during the week. And as a working professional, I couldn't do it. I called into some, but those meetings were long. Like, we had, the one I called into, it was a 4-hour meeting, broke for lunch, came back. I can't give that sort of time. I would be unemployed. So my advice to the next person has to be somebody that can give that time during the day. The 1 or 2 times a week that I was willing to give, or once a month for that meeting, you need more than that, especially for what needs to happen there as far as understanding and voting on some of the direction that they need to change, especially when you talk about the ethics, especially when you talk about just revising their bylaws and how we separate bad actors because it was written very generally. You need somebody that can be in that room. And I'd say more than half of the people who participate, they're on the city dime, spending all that time in a room instead of performing their role, which I can't afford to do, or they're retirees that have the time to sit in that room. So there's very few independent operators like me that were part of that. Mm-hmm. They either worked for the city or they were retired. Like I said, there were a few, but that was in the minority. So that would be my advice. The other one is you gotta study up. I mean, those monthly books, over 200 pages, with a ton of data about the energy output, what's going on, and the comparison. And they give you a 101 class, which is a very good class, but I had to take that book home and really spend some time on it. It took me a month to really just digest that so that I would understand when I'm sitting in that room what they were really talking about. And they did a great job explaining, but that's the highlights. There's data between the lines that you don't want to miss, you know, as we're finding out by some of the things that have happened in the news, that, you know, that one line item, you glance over it because there's no energy thrown to it, but there's something there. Mm-hmm. And so that takes time. And so that's what I would give the advice to the next person is you really got to do your homework on the information that's provided and ask as many questions as you can. I mean, they were very willing, but you got to keep asking because they're trying to do their job too. And it took a month sometimes for me to get that information, and then I had a new question and a follow-up, and then they'd have to go back because I found out something else. So that's the challenge.
Yep, and that's the iterative process of learning and refining,
Absolutely.
which is part of it. So thank you.
Other members of council, questions? Yes, Alderwoman Philbrick.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you, Rashid. You have been a great member of our community. I'm sorry to see you leave, but I met you through Immacula,
Yes.
and I was hoping that you were going to be here for a long time.
That was my
But I
intention.
understand that, so hopefully our paths will cross again with the city and in your new location. And the other thing I think that is, for me, is paramount to remember is NPU stands for Norwich Public Utilities. Public is the key word. They are not a separate entity. They are not King of the Hill over there on Golden Street. They need to be, they do an excellent job. And they will be the first ones to tell you. It's a little, I think it's more important to be commended by your peers and people in the community than to pat yourself on the back all the time. And PU, every time that I have asked a question about CMEC or rates or that kind of stuff, the classic answer that I get is that, well, we do such a great job and that's why we should be paid more than anybody else. So I think it's important for us to remember that when NPU or CMEC does work or does things for the community, that money is coming out of our pockets. It's not coming out of the pocket of the general manager or the head of CMEC. It's coming from ratepayer money. So we all have skin in the game. And transparency and communication are my two favorite words. So I thank you for the time that you have served, and you have given us a lot of information tonight, and hopefully we'll be able to find someone who will do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members of council? Alderwoman Gould.
Rashid, thank you again for being here this evening and being the first ratepayer representative to CMEC. To follow up on one of your statements, talking about the fact that these meetings are held during the day, which is not always conducive to someone being able to make the meeting or sit and listen on the telephone. Did any of the other ratepayer representatives ever express their concerns to CMEC about maybe moving their meetings, to 5 o'clock in the evening or 6 o'clock in the evening, rather than at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday.
No, that never was raised, and I didn't even think to challenge it, because at the time, like I said, it's scheduled 1 day a month. Anybody can give 1 day a month. I don't think the meeting itself is the challenge, it's all the subcommittee meetings. And there's several subcommittee meetings. And in light of the reason why the ratepayer representative was installed, I think, which is where I fell down, I think it's very important to attend all, if not most of those, because that's really where it's happening. You know, when we come at the board of directors meeting, the subcommittee has already made a decision and just makes a brief statement and then proposes. You guys know how meetings work. So, but it's in that meeting that you actually find out what's really going on. And that's where I didn't hear a lot of the action that I think would have been of benefit to the council. But like I said, several meetings during the week. I mean, I got emails all during the week, every day, and I was like, wow, I could do this one, but I can't do that one. And so it's just challenging. Like I said, somebody would have to have that kind of time. And it's not 1 day a month. It's not even twice. I mean, I had actually allocated once a week in my schedule, and it was more than that.
And as a follow-up, you talked about how much sort of homework there is to do, how much material there is to read, how much you have to digest, how you have to formulate questions. For the next ratepayer representative, should we be looking for someone who's got a business background, an engineering background, a legal background? What kind of background do you think someone should have, other than having the time, but the kind of experience or business acumen do they need to weed through all these reports and say, here's the meat and potatoes. I don't care about the salad and the dessert. This is the meat and potatoes, and this is the question I need answered on this.
I guess the best way I can answer that is whenever you install somebody, because it is a period of time, and I think you need to ask yourself what's important to the council is this time that you'd like to understand and dig into, because there's many facets. As I said, during the point where they had all these things going on where they were trying to resolve the issue with this other municipality, their way of billing was something that was in my wheelhouse. However, when you think about the things that are going on with the ethics and stuff, when we're talking about how we're going to allocate payment of legal fees in these certain situations, I think somebody with a legal or a human resources background would be the best person. I think month to month, when you're talking about just understanding the energy output, that's something you can learn, but I think somebody with some understanding in that field, it would be a quicker learning curve, but not necessarily out of the realm to just study up and understand that. Because even though it is an energy company, numbers are numbers, data is data. It would absolutely be a benefit, but 1 + 1 = 2. And stuff's got to make sense. And I'm the first one to just say in a room, look, I'm from the Bronx. Can you just dumb this down for me so I can understand what's going on? I think anybody who's humble enough to just say that doesn't necessarily have to have a background in energy, but it definitely would be a help.
Okay, and my final question. Putting all of this business with the trips to the Kentucky Derby aside and everything else, in the short time that you were sitting on the CMEC board, do you see value in Norwich Public Utilities being part of that cooperative?
Seeing the rates outside of CMEC, seeing all the other entities, because they have a commercial side that actually had other, like Mohegan Sun is a customer, there's people who come from other states. There is absolutely a value to buying energy from this cooperative. Their ability, that part was the part that amazed me, to be honest, in how they were able to leverage their buys of energy to keep things as low as possible. I thought in that regard, they did an amazing job. I thought with respect to just how they got people new to the board up to speed with understanding how the business ran, I thought that the CEO did a excellent job. The other stuff is questionable. But with respect to those pieces, I think they did it very well. I don't know how Norwich would be served seeking energy outside anywhere else unless they can beat those rates. The problem that you do have to look at, and I have to say this, CMEC does not stand alone. It's owned by these towns. So what does the town municipality do with that energy and the cost of that energy once it receives it? That's where I think the focus and the energy needs to be. CMEC can do what it's going to do, and we have to make sure we vote it right, but that $88 and $90 coming through, how much of that markup based off of operating costs are we seeing in my electric bill every month at home? That's what we have to look at, and that's where I think most of the energy should be. But that's my judgment. I think that we spent too much energy here not thinking about the markup once it leaves, and that's what's hurting me in my pocketbook. But I think there's a lot of value to it. I think when you look at your Eversource bill, I live in a town now that's fed off of Eversource, and I'm crying right now in the wintertime looking at my bill compared to what I paid through 15 winters in Norwich. I wish I was back home because I can't afford my bill these last 2 months.
Well, we wish you were back home, too.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, what I'm paying with Eversource now compared to what I paid every winter since I lived in Norwich, it's not even comparable.
I understand your pain, owning a business in Uncasville and being subject to Eversource rates. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So for the sake of my ratepayers, it's worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to wrap this up. Appreciate all your time and information and your service, and certainly all the information you shared. Clearly, we could benefit with greater frequency, perhaps quarterly, by the next person appointed. Just something to think about for the rest of us, but
Absolutely.
thank you so much. Really good to see you, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's time for us to begin. Everyone please stand. We'll be led in prayer by President Pro Tem Bill Nash.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration will instill respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all of our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representative, and that peace and harmony will mark all of our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the citizens of your community. Amen.
Thank you. Alderwoman Stephanie Burnham, please.
Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Mike. We'll begin with citizen comment general. Person addressing the council, please give your name and address. You will have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Martin Rutchick. I am an attorney. I have practiced in Norwich, Connecticut for over 60 years. Spent the majority of my life in Norwich. I've been a ratepayer, taxpayer, and I'm presently living in Mystic, Connecticut, where we've just opened a YMCA, and I only have sadness to think that we do not have one in Norwich, Connecticut, where we need it more than anyone else. Basically, I'm here tonight to talk about what has been happening with this Derbygate and Kentucky trips. And the issue is, what role does the city council play at this point? I take the position that since you are elected and the members of the DPU and CMEC are not elected, that you have some role in deciding what they will be doing in dealing with their employees who have been charged with indictments for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Terrible, terrible, heavy charges. Now, my position is this. Does the city council have a say? Does the city council have the right to even have looked into? Now, I had over a year ago, before this council came in, had a resolution prepared, and I've given a copy to Attorney Browning, because no one at the time that I prepared it would accept it, since it had to be introduced by a member of the council. It asked for an investigation into what was happening with Derbygate, DPU, where the funds were coming, what it meant to the city of Norwich. Now, you should understand that, and you do, that $1.2 million has been blown by CMEC. $300,000 has been paid out for the FBI. Whether or not they were authorized is questionable. Now they're asking for legal fees to pay for their defense. In other words, when someone breaks into your house and you then have to pay for the legal fees, that seems to be quite a stretch. Now, if you figure that sum of money, which is almost $2 million, and what the city of Norwich gets, I thought Norwich got 30%, not 20%, but it's easy to figure the mathematics. That money has denied the ratepayers from having their rates taken care of. Now, I'll be quick. You, under the charter, there's a 10% gross from the Department of Public Utilities. If they go ahead and blow their money in taking care of their employee who has been charged, and that's going to deny the ratepayers an opportunity to pick up more than that 10%. Now, you must consider, and even in our prayer, to set a leadership. I'll wrap it up in that you set a standard. If you will allow this to go by the boards as to what's been happening and not to have some remorse, some remuneration, some punishment, then you are not setting a standard. And with all your employees, they're going to say, why not? They got away with it. Why can't I try? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. John Wagner?
My name is John Wagner. I am the current president of the Norwich Area Veterans Council. For those of you that don't know what the Veteran Council is, we are a group that has a monthly meeting on the first Wednesday of every month. We consist of 15 different units made up of veterans units and their auxiliaries and veteran supported units. We are very active in the city. Most of the programs that you see that are presented each year, such as the Pearl Harbor Ceremony, Vietnam Veterans Day, Memorial Day Parade, all come from our unit. Our purpose is to serve the city, work with the city and the community, and to support veterans, the programs, the memorials. We change out the wreaths every year. That is what we do. I am here tonight as president of the Norwich Veterans Council. I want to offer the Vets Council support in the city's upcoming effort to make much-needed repairs to Taffill's World War I Memorial Park. The Veterans Council is willing to work with the city to restore and upgrade the park so that it can still serve its purpose as a historical, fitting memorial to those men from Taffill who served and those that gave their lives in World War I. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions?
No,
Thank
we
you.
listened today. Thank you. Bill Champagne?
Good evening. I'm Bill Champagne, president of the Norwich Historical Society. My address is 7 Northwest Corner Road, Preston. This evening, I'd like to give you 2 updates from the Historical Society and offer 2 comments from us. The Historical Society was very busy last year, and we have a full plate in store for this coming year. Regan couldn't be here this evening, but she wrote the summary that's being passed of our activities last year and this upcoming year. On the handout, I've highlighted the initiative we are calling Experience Historic Norwich. As we have said many times, we believe Norwich's history and heritage are near the top of Norwich's assets. Elaine Carmichael gave a presentation to the council in November about heritage development in Norwich, why it's important and steps we can take going forward, and we are following up on her recommendations. We held a meeting with a small group earlier this month at Otis Library, and we will hold a second meeting soon. The group consists of Norwich officials, members of the Mohegan Tribe, people concerned with Norwich's history, and members of the hospitality industry in Norwich. In the near future, we will convene a meeting to involve the general public and ask for their input and feedback. The goal is to establish an initiative which will take advantage of Norwich's incredibly rich historic assets to better promote them, package them for visitors and residents to more easily appreciate them. And those are our two updates. Our comments. We applaud your upcoming goal-setting workshop with Jim O'Shea. That sounds like good planning. And we applaud the effort to bring an $8 million bond issue to the taxpayers last year. A bond issue such as this is a bold step and one we think can move Norwich forward. We hope that rebranding the city is on the list of things to accomplish, and that any reformulated bond issue include a significant heritage development component. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tim Smith?
My name is Timothy Smith, and I am at 43 Beach Street. This council may be deliberating the consideration of dogs in Mohegan Park in perhaps the near future. This relates to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Section 14-6. Now, this section is indicated on some of the parks' no pets allowed signs. And the bottom line of that sign in caps says, police enforced. Section 14-6C of the ordinance specifically states that no dogs are allowed in Mohegan Park. Now, the Sunday, January 20th Norwich Bulletin article, Mohegan Park Panel Considers Dog Ban Change, is truly an informative commentary for consideration and discussion on repealing the park's dog ban. Now, the Public Works Director commented that public safety and liability issues will have to be considered. Well, these issues really should be considered and reviewed now, as dogs are allowed in the park. A reasonable attorney for a dog casualty victim would place the city at the top of a civil lawsuit for negligence due to visitors' reliance that dogs are banned. Our police chief stated the dog ban is difficult to enforce. They, the police, simply advise them that they are not allowed in the park. And a reasonable attorney would seek the frequency of citations for violation of 14-6C from the NPD blotter to support the argument that enforcement is lacking. However, lack of enforcement alone is not common sense reason to repeal the ordinance. Many city ordinances lack the resources to enforce, especially in tough budgetary times. Now, the Mohegan Park Committee chairwoman, a proponent of accommodating the dogs, also cited many issues with the permitted presence of dogs in the park, specifically the difficulty to regulate safety, health, and cleanliness. A restricted area designation without enforcement will spill over to an increase of dogs in the picnic areas and the playscapes. It would be wise to consider interviewing the city dog park, which is on Asylum Street, but to interview those stewards as to the maintenance of that facility for dog feces bags and receptacles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Anyone else like to speak to the council about any subject? Mr. Kraft?
Good evening, David Krebs, 47 Prospect Street. I am addressing two topics. Number one, the 5-year funds for an opioid solution to New London County's crisis. First, a Connecticut magazine article that I copied for the council some time ago targeted the in-state corporation producing the Oxy Connecticut that continues enriching the owners due to legislative lack of interest. Second, last week, Hartford Radio, WTIC, reported unemployment benefits increased $5 million more in 2018 than 2017, mostly by 5 agencies, naming 2, corrections and health and drug addiction. Governor Malloy released thousands of prisoners, and remember, the Board of Ed collects unfunded mandate for an MER. So, why are taxpayers stuck with matching funds while unemployment benefits surge? Topic 2 raises the question, are we citizens or NPU subjects? Last month, I spent more than 1 hour at NPU questioning a $75 fine for gas meter no access, which I deferred to NPU's Customers' Bill of Rights because I was never notified. Exhibit A is what it looks like. Exhibit A is an NP notice postmarked September 2018 for another property. I received many more for that property. One stated inside meters are required to be inspected by NPU contractor PPS every 3 years. That is Exhibit B. Looks like this. In that I would be penalized $25 a month after November 7th of 2018 until the end when disconnect happened. Exhibit C is a red letter notice I received this Saturday, and it's a termination notice stating our records show blah, blah, blah. This morning I called PPS and our records indicate that Inspector Allen checked 47 Prospect Street's gas meter August 31st of 2017. So do you have any suggestions for this NPU non-citizen?
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to address the council? Yes, Mr. Ryan.
Good evening, Ryan Thompson, Public Works Director. It's unfortunate all the veterans left because I just wanted to say that I also wanted to work with them regarding the Taft-Bill Memorial Park, and I want to seek their input and tried to seek their input just so everybody's aware that we were not trying to operate without their input in our maintenance of that facility. I just want to put that on the record. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else under citizen comment? Second time, anyone else under citizen comment? Yeah, please.
Good evening, Greg Grippo, 209 Boswell Avenue. I just came here to support Dale Plummer as city historian. I think the man is a treasure, and I hope he and his knowledge gets utilized more in our schools for public education and appreciation of what Norwich has as architectural treasures. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else under citizen comment? Second time, citizen comment. Third time, anyone else under citizen comment? Seeing no one else, I declare it closed. Thank everyone for sharing their concerns with us this evening.
Mr. Mayor, can I have a moment? Can I have a moment?
Please.
I just want to, I know a lot of people watching the councils. As you know, the federal government shut down, and the Department of Homeland Security, I'm a contracted officer through that department, but the United States Coast Guard members in our community are not receiving paychecks. And as of right now, there is a food pantry it's up and running at the Coast Guard Academy in New London, and there are a few local businesses that in our community that are collecting food for that food pantry. So if anyone's interested, I know right now the food pantry will run till Friday, and then it'll be reassessed depending on if the shutdown is continuing. So at this time, Shell Mart, the Norristown Shell on West Town, the Royal Punjani Restaurant on Main Street, and Billy Wilson's, these guys, and I believe Epicure, are collecting donations for the food pantry. If you don't want to go there, you can simply go down to the United States Coast Guard Academy. If you have a valid ID, driver's license, you can go right to Leamy Hall and deliver the items there yourself if you like. Or contact the mayor's office. I'll come get it, pick it up for you, and bring it down myself. I work there quite a bit. So please help out those guys and girls. They're doing their jobs. If you go by the police, the academy down there, you'll see all the professors are there and all the, I mean, it's running up, and so anything you can do will help out, and I appreciate the time, Mayor.
Thank you. Yes.
Let me add to that, because Mr. Nash may not know, the city of Norwich is collecting food for the United States Coast Guard Academy. You can drop off your donations at the city manager's office, and the food will be delivered to the Coast Guard Academy on January 29th.
I didn't know, thank you.
Thank you.
So if you can get to the city manager's office, you can deliver the food there.
Again, thank you all. Next, please.
Yes. Public hearing number 1, an ordinance authorizing the appointment of an additional member to the Board of Assessment Appeals pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 9-199C.
I declare this public hearing open and invite anyone who wants to speak on behalf in favor of this ordinance as proposed. You will have 3 minutes. Please give your name and address at the microphone. Anyone like to speak in favor of this ordinance as proposed? Anyone like to speak in favor of this ordinance as proposed? Anyone like to speak in favor of the ordinance as proposed? Seeing none, is anyone here to speak against the ordinance as proposed? Anyone like to speak against the ordinance as proposed? Third and final time, anyone like to speak in opposition to this ordinance? Seeing none, I declare the public hearing closed. Read, please.
An ordinance authorizing the appointment of an additional member to the Board of Assessment Appeals pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 9-199C.
And as for a motion, please, to bring the ordinance forward. Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderwoman Gould, is there discussion? Yes, Alderwoman Philbrick.
Will this vacancy be posted immediately if Thank you.
Oh, okay.
My question was answered, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there further comment or questions? Yes, Alderwoman DeLucia.
It's neither a comment nor a question. I guess it's a concern. This is going to give us 4 members on the Board of Appeals, so we could have tie votes on appeals issues.
That is correct. We're permitted to appoint up to 2 alternates. However, only 1 person applied as of this time. We will certainly have to double our efforts to seek others. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good point. Is there further comment?
Before you vote, may I ask, did the motion include waiving the full reading of the text?
My apologies. You're amendable to that. Thank you. Any further comment? Seeing none? Yes, Alderwoman Philbrick.
In looking at this a little bit, just clarify the language for me. In the public hearing, it says authorizing the appointment of an additional member, but in the resolution, it says a temporary member.
Right, they'd only be on for 1 year.
It is 1 year.
Okay, so, thank you.
This is permitted for cities when they are looking at the revaluation as it is put into play and completed. The expectation is there will be longer appeal processes to be dealt with, which is why we ask for this opportunity. Seeing no other comment, call the roll.
Alderwoman Burnham?
Yes.
Alderman Browning?
Yes.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes.
Alderwoman Philbrick?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Nash?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
7-0.
Motion carries. The ordinance is adopted. 7-0 is the count.
Petition and communication number 1, letter of resignation of Victor Holly from the Commission of Persons with Disabilities.
Motion, please, to Alderwoman Nash. Pro Tem Nash, Alderwoman Gould. Okay, is there any discussion? All those in favor accepting the letter with regret? We thank the individual for their service. Unanimous.
Number
Two,
2,
please.
oops, sorry. Number 2, communication from Chairman of the 347 Central Avenue Committee of Sale.
A motion for us to accept the communication. Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderwoman Gould. Their discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Sorry.
Thank you. Unanimous. 7-0. City Manager's report.
For the benefit of those in the audience, I'll read the summary of City Manager Solomon's report. The purchase orders have been issued for the 5 fire trucks for the city's volunteer fire departments. The amount is within the $3.2 million bond approved by the voters in 2017. I announced the appointment of veteran firefighter Tracy Montoya as the city's new fire chief after a detailed and extensive process. Tracy's swearing-in ceremony will be held on Thursday, January 31st, 2019 in council chambers, with a reception immediately following in room 335. Chief Montoya is a 27-year veteran of the department and was the top candidate out of 19 applicants. I am looking forward to working with him in his new capacity as fire chief. I attended the Board of Directors meeting at Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and the monthly Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments and Seat meetings. I also had the pleasure of attending the 34th anniversary of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. birthday celebration luncheon that was held at Norwich Free Academy. The Human Resources Department has scheduled mandatory reasonable suspicion training sessions for employees in a supervisory capacity. 4 sessions have been scheduled for the last week of January. Norwich Youth and Family Services was awarded a $7,000 grant through Norwich Public Schools Extended School Hours Funding. They will partner with the Norwich Police Department for the 2nd year to create opportunities for students to build positive relationships with the police and the community. The full press release is posted on the city's website. The Norwich Police Department has issued a community survey with the help of the National Police Foundation and the National Law Enforcement Applied Research and Data Platform. The survey is intended for all Norwich community members and will help provide the Norwich Police Department with important data related to community engagement. All responses are kept confidential and it will be on the website until April 13th, 2019. The School Facilities Committee survey is also on the city's website. They're still looking for input from the community on the priorities for the future educational facilities in the city. The survey is also on the Board of Education's website. The city's lockbox tax payments as of Friday, January 18th were 840 payments totaling $1.1 million. Payments at Norwich People's Bank branches were 160 payments totaling $215,627. This initiative produces shorter lines at the tax office and allows the city to invest the money more quickly. I've attached the department heads' reports with the addition of a report from Norwich Community Development Corporation for the quarter ending December 31st, 2018.
Thank you. Are there questions of the comptroller? Yes, Alderman Philbin.
What exactly is reasonable suspicion training? I'm suspicious.
I haven't been to the training yet, but I believe that reasonable suspicion is if you reasonably suspect that your employees are under the influence of a substance.
Well, excuse me for saying this, but I would assume that for years that people would have this, it's like a teacher is a mandated reporter. We have to send department heads to training to realize that something might be suspicious. Just seems a little strange to me. So who would I contact to get more information?
I can reach out to Bridget Marks to get you more information.
Are we paying for this training?
I believe this is from the police department. Yeah, it's either through the police department or through CCM or KERMA, so I don't believe that there would be additional cost to the city for it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Alderman DeLucia.
Josh, I'm wondering, because obviously being a freshman alderman and the fact that reevaluation only happens every 5 years, at some point will we receive a summary from the assessor's office that tells us things like what the increase in the grand, or what the change in the grand list was, what percentage of properties increased in value versus decreased, and so on. So we have a picture as to what happened with the revaluation and how it's going to affect us down the road?
Yeah, I believe that's the normal course of business for her to provide a summary of what happened with the revaluation.
And any, now, I don't mean to pin you down, but at what point do you think that we would receive that? Would it be before we start taking up budget issues?
Yeah, I think that the grand list, they're still, they had a number of sessions with homeowners and with businesses in the past several weeks, and they're compiling that data. I can ask Assessor Donna Ralston for an estimate when she'll be able to put together such a summary.
Okay, thank you.
I can share with you, I spoke with Donna Ralston about that. Vision Appraisal completed their last hearings on Thursday of this past week, and so they will be putting together summaries of those findings, forwarding that to her office. From there, they still have some of their own due diligence to do, which is verification, even in some cases of address changes and things of that nature still have to be incorporated. But she hopes to bring that forward to us middle February. I don't think any later than that, long before we see a budget in April.
To that point, though, on what you just, the point you just mentioned about the hearings, why the need for an additional person on the Assessment Appeals Board if they're done?
No, it's a two-step process. Vision Appraisals is required to also receive appeals directly before they submit the final determination on each property. The appeals that this alternate will be dealing with are once that information is provided to the assessor's office, and then that person has the right to appeal that bill from the assessor's office. They don't have the final product where they can actually send out the assessment for the individual properties in the city yet. They need all the information from Vision Appraisal. But again, part of the process requires them to also hear an appeal from an individual, because they've notified people what the assessment is, Vision Appraisal. You can appeal to them first before they submit the final findings to the assessor's office.
And those are the hearings that just recently completed?
Yes.
Okay,
That
thank
is
you.
correct. Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there are no further questions, thank you very much, Mr. Comptroller. Welcome. Next, we have citizen comment and resolutions. I declare it open. If anyone would like to speak to any of the 6 resolutions on our agenda, the microphone is yours. Anyone like to speak under citizen comment on resolutions? Anyone else? Yes, sir. Mr. David Kraft, please join us.
David Krebs, 47 Prospect Street. I'll address resolutions 3, 4, and 6. The city continues to, the council continues to increase their real estate portfolio, and as a couple of questions were just asked, the public has no idea of how much real estate the council has in that portfolio. I'm sure that has a bearing on the taxes that we pay. If the city has a portfolio, who pays the taxes for that portfolio of city-held, council-held properties? Now, for example, when the city manager starts his budget, he has the first page, I believe, covers goals. And when you get down to the council section, the goal is reducing taxes. So will we see a tax reduction based on all of the real estate that the city has sold and all of the gains that NPU has achieved with all of their gas line expansion, et cetera, that everybody talks about, all of the gains that's been made over the past year or two? So I looked back to the Saturday meeting, and I corrected the title to match what goes on for the rest of the city and changed it to an informational scratching meeting workshop to an information goal for NCDC over the city council. Now, why would the NCDC want to have a goal to enlighten the city council about economic planning? I would think that the council could pass off some of these properties to NCDC in lieu of funds. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else under citizen comment? Anyone else under citizen comment? Finally, anyone else under citizen comment on resolutions? Seeing no one else, I declare that closed, and thank you.
Resolution 1, relative to an appointment of a temporary member of the Board of Assessment Appeals.
A motion, please, to bring the resolution forward. Alderwoman Gould, second Pro Tem Nash. Is there discussion? Seeing none. The person being appointed is Mr. Larry Rice. All those in favor? Unanimous, the vote is 7-0.
Number 2, relative to a reappointment of the city historian.
Resolution to bring it forward, please. Pro Tem Nash, second Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Seeing none, the appointment is the reappointment of Mr. Dale Plummer. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Vote 7-0.
Number 3, relative to the transfer of 347 Central Avenue to Lauren Kang Properties, LLC.
Motion, please, bring it forward. Alderwoman Gould, second Pro Tem Nash. Is there discussion? Alderwoman Gould.
I'd like to thank the members of the 347 Central Avenue Committee for finding this developer. Mr. Kang worked in 7 months to restore this property to a beautiful condition. It will now go back on the tax rolls. And I'm hoping that he might find another piece of property that he'd like to rehab, because he did a beautiful job. If anybody's been by there, what a difference 7 months has made. So thank you very much to that committee and to Mr. Kang for a job well done.
Thank you. Is there further discussion, comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous. 7-0 is the count.
Number 4, relevant to the conveyance of property on 28 Cedar and property on Vine Street.
Motion, please, bring it forward. Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderwoman Gould, is there discussion? Yes, Alderwoman Gould.
Just for the record, while we're taking these properties back, they're relatively very small pieces of property. Most of them are non-buildable. And Chief Daly from the Norwich Police Department sees the value in Vine Street at a later date as it abuts their future site for their communications tower. So keeping that little tiny piece of property is a win for the city, because we're going to need to put the communication tower up. It'll be a little bit of a buffer for the neighbors for that property. And it's unfortunate that that piece of property won't be on the tax rolls, but we are doing I'm working my damnedest to get properties off of the city side and back onto the tax-paying side.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Yes, Alderman Philbrick.
I think it would be helpful if, at some point in time, perhaps on the city website, there would be a complete and up-to-date listing of any and all properties owned by the city of Norwich. I don't think people realize how many, I'm not talking about schools and fire stations and that, I'm talking about individual residences. There's a tremendous, I don't like to use the word burden, but the burden is the word that I will use on the Public Works Department. There are fire hazards, there are public health issues. The sooner we can get rid of these, the better off we'll be. But I think it's important that the city residents know that there are committees out there working very hard to alleviate or at least diminish these issues. There are a lot of properties in the city of Norwich that are owned by the city, and whether you want to hear it or not, the city is not the best landlord. It's too much. It's too much for the departments to handle. So Stacy and her committee and Ryan have done a remarkable job, but I think it would be helpful. We get them in bits and pieces. But if people understood the magnitude of what they're dealing with, maybe they'd be a little more sympathetic or understanding of how much work is involved. We're not just acquiring these properties for the heck of it.
Thank you very much. Thoughtful suggestions. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous vote 7-0.
Number 5, relevance to the conveyance of property off Wedge Ledge Drive to the city of Norwich.
Motion, please. All Pro Tem Nash, second. Alderwoman Gould, is there discussion? Alderman Browning.
I'd like to use my time to ask Attorney Driscoll to explain the abbreviated history of this piece of property and why we are obtaining it.
This is a piece of property that was developed many years ago in, I think the site plan that came before the city was developed in April, finished in April of 1970. This was intended to include the creation of a street to become a public street, which exists today, known as West Ledge Drive, and also it was to include the conveyance of some property along the, I'm going to say, the southeast side of West Ledge Drive to the city of Norwich. It came before the council in August of 1971. They referred it to the commission on the city plan, and on October 4th, 1971, they got back a favorable recommendation, and they accepted West Ledge Drive as a public street. What became the Peachtree Apartments were developed there. That property was recently sold this summer to a new developer who has plans for it. And in reviewing it, it was realized that the lot where the drainage for West Ledge Drive is replaced was to have been conveyed by the city in the original plans and by the approval of the commission on the city plan, but never been conveyed. So roughly 50 years later, we're correcting that oversight and asking the council to accept it. The Public Works Department has indicated a good deal of drainage is on the site that will be the city site. If you visualize West Ledge Drive, what is to be developed, what was developed for Peachtree is on the northwest side. What was to be conveyed to the city is on the southeast side, and they're separated by West Ledge Drive. They're referred to as Parcel A and Parcel B. In the deed, we're getting Parcel B. It's about an acre and 1.2 acres, perhaps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further questions? If any member of council would like to see the proposed development there are pictorials in my office. You're more than welcome to stop in and see what they're proposing. All those in favor of the resolution? Oh, please,
I
go
do
ahead.
have a question. Brian, could you? So this property that the city's going to take into its portfolio is, you said that is it the like, retention area for the drainage on the rest of the site?
It's the outlets, the outfalls for the various drainage features along West Ledge
Yes.
Road. It's mostly wetland area, and it's not buildable, but it would be good for the city to have simply for access, especially for MS4 compliance and inspections of those natures. So, yeah, it's something that we actually thought we already owned.
Because there's somewhat of a water course that runs through there.
Right, that's the
too.
wetland area
Right.
that's in there.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution? It's unanimous. It's 7-0 count.
Thank you. Number 6, relative to issue an RFQ on 11 Lake Street for demolition.
Motion, please, bring it forward. Gould, seconded by Pro Tem Nash. Is there discussion? Alderwoman Gould?
Just for the public's edification, the money that we're going to use to demo 11 Lake Street was authorized in a bond by a council back in September of 2008. It was bond ordinance number 1600, and there is some $61,000 in that account. That should be enough to take down, demo this building, and maybe we'll have some left over for the next building we're going to tackle, but just so that you know that this came from a previous bond, there's no money we already have that we're going to spend that has to be spent for demolition of properties that the city owns.
Thank you. Alderman Browning?
I've previously passed out a amendment of Resolution 6, which involves striking paragraph 4 and replacing with the following text. Whereas the City Council of the City of Norwich previously approved bond ordinance 1600 on September 15th, 2008 for the demolition of city-owned structures, and the council finds that there is $61,362.16 remaining in this appropriation, which is sufficient funds to pay for the cost of demolishing the structure at 11 Lake Street, and further finds it to be in the best interest of the City of Norwich to demolish the structure, the proposed amendment simply specifies the specific bond ordinance when it passed in the amount in the appropriation, and my theory here was it is easier for someone later looking at this to find this in the resolution that passed itself rather than having to go through the minutes. So what I did is I kind of filled in the blanks, and so I put this amendment up for vote. Do I have a second?
Okay, motion, Browning, second to Berta. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 4-3.
Why the opposed?
Resolution as amended, is there further discussion?
Yeah, why be opposed to clarification?
We're, in the context of the meeting, we don't have public comment following a vote. Is there further discussion on the resolution as amended?
As not amended.
Seeing none.
No,
What's that?
it did pass.
I don't
As
understand.
amended, yes.
The amendment. I thought that's what you were calling for, I'm sorry.
No. Is there further discussion on the resolution now as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, votes 7-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Gould, Nash, all those in favor of adjournment?
hopefully be done with some help